Joining us now from Washington is Congressman Allen West, Republican from Florida. A retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, Congressman West served more than 20 years in the military and in several combat zones, including Iraq and Afghanistan. He is the recipient of many military awards, including the Bronze Star. And Congressman West, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Kathleen. It's always a pleasure.
Representative West, before I ask you your thoughts on the situation in Syria, I'd like to get your take on a developing story. We've learned the unemployment rate rose to 8.2% in April, a very dismal showing and the third such performance by the jobs market in the last 3 months. What's your reaction?
Well, it's a sad thing. I think that the president's policies are failing the American people. We have now hit 40 consecutive months of unemployment in the United States of America at or above 8%. And really, if you look at the U6 computation, which includes the underemployed and those people that have dropped off the rolls, the actual unemployment number is probably closer to 14.5%. So these policies are not helping the private sector to grow and create the job opportunities that are necessary to turn this economic situation around.
Now, the jobless rate is obviously a lagging sign of economic performance. The economy remains a major campaign issue and the one voters care about the most. What does it tell us about the political fortunes of Mitt Romney and Barack Obama?
Well, I tell you that President Obama is pretty much in a corner. It's a very desperate situation for him because it is 3 years and 6 months into this recovery. And remember, it was a couple of summers ago that he said there was the summer of recovery, but yet we know that this is the worst economic recovery that we have seen in the United States of America's history. When you make the comparative analysis with President Ronald Reagan, when he was coming out of that recession, GDP growth was somewhere between 6 to 6.5%. With President Obama, we've recently seen numbers be revised back down to like 1.9% GDP growth. And we know that the debt to GDP ratio is still very high, and that is a very bad indicator for him. And I think Governor Romney now has to really show his economic prowess and come up with a very good strategic plan to turn this economy around.
The Obama campaign has just released a new video assailing Mitt Romney's economic record as Massachusetts governor. What do you make of this campaign tactic, and will it work with voters?
It's not going to work with voters because what the voters want to know is, what are you going to do, Mr. President? Because at this point in time, you have been an abject failure. And but once again, when you're a desperate person, much the same as a cat being cornered, you're going to come out and really fight even stronger. And I think that what the President Obama is doing in trying to attack Governor Romney is not what the American people are looking for. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for a statesman.
During the primary, you said that you would not endorse any of the GOP presidential candidates, saying that you are not in the endorsements business and that the people should decide. Considering that Romney will be the GOP nominee, can you endorse him now?
Well, I think it's a moot point to endorse him now. What I did say is that whoever is the eventual nominee will get my support 110%, and that's exactly what Governor Romney will get.
And does that include an endorsement?
Well, I mean, it's like I said, that's a moot issue. I mean, what does an endorsement from Allen West mean? I think the most important thing is that Allen West is very willing and ready to work for Governor Romney down in a very important state, and that's Florida.
Your home state of Florida is the fourth largest state, a major swing state with 29 electoral votes up for grabs. Last week, a Quinnipiac poll had Mitt Romney leading Barack Obama there 47% to 41%. Do you believe that Mitt will go on to win the Sunshine State?
I believe he will, because I think that the only place where President Obama could have some success will be down in South Florida. And that is where you still have some pretty high unemployment numbers, foreclosure numbers, and also you have a Jewish community that is really not too warmed over with his, I guess, relationship with Israel. You know, he's been president for going on 3 years and a half, and he has not gone to visit Israel, which is our strongest and best ally in the Middle East.
Okay, let's turn to another big story this week, Syria. UN Special Envoy Kofi Annan described the recent massacre of more than 100 civilians there as a tipping point. The opposition claimed Friday that a dozen more were executed there. Do you see diplomatic pressure on President Assad's regime working, and will the regime conform to the UN peace plan?
Well, first of all, I don't have a lot of trust and confidence in Kofi Annan, and I don't have even less trust and confidence in the United Nations peace plan. I've had some dealings with the United Nations, and I think if we go back and remember what happened in Bosnia, you saw we had to call in the United States military to try to have some type of peace situation in Bosnia and also in Kosovo. So the very thing that we have to understand in Syria is that on one side you have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Russia, and also Bashar Assad. On the other side you have freedom fighters, you have Al-Qaeda and radical Islamists, and also you have the backing of the state of Turkey. So if you start to interject yourself in a means other than diplomatic, whose side are you on? And we don't need to put our military in a situation where they're caught in the crossfire. I don't see the diplomatic situation helping right now because Bashar al-Assad is an autocrat, he's a dictator, and that's just how they do business. Remember, his father did the exact same thing in a city there, I believe in Aleppo in Syria, where he massacred an entire town. That's how they do business. And so if we're going to go in there, we need to go in with very clear rules of engagement that we're going to, get Bashar al-Assad out of there. But understand, you'll be starting World War III. And I don't think that that's something we need to, or maybe World War IV, we don't need to get into that when we have sequestration looming over the head of our military.
So what's the solution there? The U.S. remains opposed to U.S. military involvement there. I mean, do we let events take their course? Or should the U.S. then perhaps arm rebel forces, as Mitt Romney suggests? Or should we be engaging in airstrikes against Assad's forces, as Senator John McCain suggests? I mean, what do you think that we need to do?
Well, first of all, let's think about the unintended consequences, the second and third order effects, and I think that's what a lot of people don't think about. If you're arming the rebels, who really are these rebels? I mean, we did the same thing in Libya, and who are the people now in charge in Libya? If you are talking about running airstrikes against Bashar al-Assad, once again, you're talking about a very tough urban situation, and who ends up filling the vacuum of leadership? You know, we were in such a rush to get rid of Hosni Mubarak, and now you got the Muslim Brotherhood and radical Islamists in charge in Egypt, and the Muslim Brotherhood has run a presidential candidate, which is something they said they're not going to do. I think we need to sit down and take time to really think about the second, third order effects and understand what are the ramifications, not just in the near term, but in the long term. And I think that we should be listening to our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel, as far as what are their concerns and what would they like to see happen because they share that border with Syria.
Now, under the debt ceiling budget deal, Congress agreed to automatic cuts to the defense budget if no future budget agreements are made. What happens if automatic defense cuts are allowed to kick in?
If the sequestration kicks in, that is another $500 to $600 billion of cuts to our military, on top of the agreed $487 billion of cuts under the Budget Control Act. That means that you will have the smallest ground force that the United States has ever had since 1940. You will have the smallest Navy since 1915. And you will have the smallest Air Force since we created the modern United States Air Force. And that is why we shouldn't have people talking about military operations until we solve this thing about sequestration and we find the requisite amount of spending cuts up here in Washington, D.C. to make sure that we don't have our military, which is only about 19.6% of our federal budget, subsuming about 50 to 55% of budget cuts.
A Gallup poll this week finds veterans overwhelmingly support Mitt Romney over Barack Obama in the GOP presidential election, 58 to 38%. Why do you think that is?
It's very simple. I mean, President Obama, in his budget that he sent over, would raise TRICARE health care fees, tripling those TRICARE health care fees. We know that there are a lot of cuts to the military that he is not standing up to try to stave off. So the United States military and our veteran community, they understand who is standing up for them, and it's definitely not the president. He can come out and give all the speeches that he wants, but just yesterday he threatened a veto of the military construction and VA benefits bill if it did not have anything about project labor agreements which would favor unions. So once again, he's putting political issues above taking care of our military, their families, and also our veterans.
When it comes to dealing with the threat of a nuclear Iran, President Obama has utilized diplomacy and now sanctions on Iran with very little, if any, impact. Do you think either Israel or the U.S. will strike Iran?
Well, there comes a time when diplomacy and sanctions and rhetoric and talk are going to run out. The longer we allow them to have time, it works on their side, not ours. They continue to go forward with their nuclear program. They continue to harden the facilities by which they can protect the nuclear program. And so there's going to come a time we have to realize we cannot have a Chamberlain moment We're going to have to do something to make sure that they don't have that capability and capacity. And look at it this way, Catherine. One of the reasons why we continue to be very tiptoey around Pakistan is because they have nuclear weapons. You know, and especially when you look at what has happened with this Pakistani doctor who enabled us to be able to take out the world's most wanted terrorist. And now they've sentenced him to 33 years in prison on the charge of treason. That is absolutely insidious.
Last question. There's been talk of an attack before the summer, but we see that is approaching very quickly. Do you think President Obama has handled this situation well?
I don't think that President Obama has handled the situation with Iran, with Egypt, or with Libya very well. I know that he is very good with his little own personal target list, which reminds me of Lyndon Johnson approving bombing targets during the Vietnam War. That is not the business of the president. He is supposed to be more strategically minded. We had an opportunity back with the Iranian Green Movement to make a change in leadership in Iran, and the president punted on that. And so I think that that's where you continue to see these failures. He is not very good at foreign policy. I don't care what his friends continue to try to prop him up and say.
All right, Representative Allen West, Republican from Florida. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Kathleen, thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.